What sets the United States apart from other nations on the earth? Is it the concentration of wealth, or the prevalence of poverty, the peace and quiet, or the violence? Perhaps it's all of the above. However, there is something more. What truly distinguishes the US is its unique ability to police the world as it sees fit, regardless of the cost. Is America pushing its democracy to a breaking point by doing so? In this new series from CGTN, we delve into some of America's long-standing issues and their impact on the world.
The world drug problem is a prime concern for the World Health Organization.
Never saw people shooting up on the street like they're doing.
Madeline Stokely, who lives in Harlem in Upper Manhattan, belongs to a group of volunteers who regularly patrol the neighborhood, cleaning up discarded drugs paraphernalia.
One of the numbers is not visible at the end, so let's...
If they see an addict using a dirty syringe, they offer them a clean one. In this way, they hope to stop the spread of hepatitis C and AIDS locally.
Right now we see two men, and it appears that they could be shooting up, so it's something that looked like it could have been that. Again, making it uncomfortable for the residents to just take a stroll through the park.
A few blocks in particular that are just inundated with people on the street. And then also feeling your own lack of safety, just the visual, seeing someone who just looks like they really should be in a hospital and maybe in intensive care, and you seeing that all day, every day. It's just really sad and depressing.
In 2021, of the 280 million Americans aged 12 and older, more than 30 million were regular drug users. The number of addicts in the US accounts for 12% of the world's total, 3 times the figure as a proportion of the global population. Around 60% of the illegal drugs supplied worldwide are consumed in the US. Behind these figures lies the tragic tale of a drugs epidemic and of the toll it is taking on the users, their families, and society.
What are you doing? I'm cleaning on the meadow.
Danielle Urt is in her 20s and a heroin addict. Her mother filmed this video at their home in Huntington, West Virginia.
And this is the result of drugs.
Every time I would try to quit, I would get sick, and then I would want it. And it was the hardest thing I've ever had to do, probably. I've tried to quit it. I couldn't tell you how many times.
Compounding her problems, Danielle, already a mother of 2, fell pregnant again. Following a prenatal ultrasound test, the doctor told her that although her unborn child looked perfectly healthy, he would be born addicted to opiates and would suffer the associated problems.
I just can't handle that, looking at my baby and knowing, I did that. I just think that is the most selfish thing in the world to do.
Danielle's experience is far from being unique. In the United States, stories like hers are so commonplace that people are no longer affected by them. Half a century ago, by contrast, attitudes toward drug abuse were very different. In the 1960s, the United States became embroiled in the Vietnam War. In the confrontation between the massive military machine and the anti-war sentiment in society, the American civil rights movement was born. a generation of young Americans, represented by the hippie culture, emerged. Drug-taking became a symbol of their rebellion against mainstream society.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse.
In response to the worsening drug problem and the breakdown in social order, in the early 1970s, the US launched a war on drugs. At the start of the 21st century, a series of disasters, including the 9/11 terrorist attack, the Iraq War, and the global financial crisis, launched the US economy on a period of decline. The situation was exacerbated by the need for massive government spending to combat drug crime. But without any noticeable improvement in the drug situation, and amid widespread public doubts over the effectiveness of the drug control efforts, calls for the legalization of drugs grew louder. The government, mindful of the economic benefits, began to shift its stance. Cannabis, with its relatively low toxicity, was the obvious first threshold to cross in the legalization of drugs. Cannabis is considered a gateway drug. Most long-term users began by smoking cannabis. In 2014, Colorado became the first state to legalize cannabis use.
We're going to be looking at 3 to 4 times the demand.
The move not only stimulated local consumption, but even spawned cannabis tourism.
That will produce tens of millions of dollars of new tax revenue for the state.
Before long, Montana, Arizona, New Jersey, California, and other states, lured by the potential economic benefits, followed suit and announced the legalization of cannabis. In 2020, boosted by the coronavirus epidemic, cannabis sales in the US hit a record high of $17.5 billion, surging 46% from 2019. The increasing numbers of people using cannabis and other drugs are also voters. So, it's no surprise that drugs have become a major electoral issue. Both major parties were quick to give the green light to the drugs train. In November 2020, during the presidential election campaign, Oregon passed 2 bills, making it the first state to legalize hard drugs such as heroin, cocaine, and methamphetamine. As to why these bills were adopted, the answer is simple. During an election campaign, when Democrats and Republicans are evenly matched, whoever can win over the drug-taking voters is likely to win. After all, for politicians, votes and power are far more important than people's health.
What we've found is that the cannabis voter has power. Believe it or not, if you vote, you actually have a lot of power to swing these races.
Just 2 years later, at the end of 2022, to the delight of countless addicts, the country's first government-licensed cannabis dispensary officially opened in New York. The authorities were effectively granting the population carte blanche to take drugs.
No one should be in jail just for using or possessing marijuana. It's already legal in many states.
It seems that in the war between humans and drugs, it's the drugs that are winning. Predictably, the legalization of cannabis has accelerated the proliferation of drugs. Of particular concern is the growing problem of opioid abuse. In the United States, drugs are freely prescribed to relieve pain and ease stress. As a result, pharmaceuticals companies have invested heavily in campaigns to promote the theory that opioids are harmless. They also encourage doctors to prescribe drugs indiscriminately and pharmacies to promote opioid use. As a result, patients have unwittingly formed an addiction.
Manipulative information by the manufacturers and all of the entities pushing their drugs. The vast majority of physicians prescribing opioids were just trying to do their job, but it just came from so many sources that they convinced the general populace of physicians that it wasn't as dangerous as we thought it was.
Sarah Wilson has 4 children. After being injured in a traffic accident a few years ago, she began taking a morphine-based opioid to relieve her physical pain. However, she developed a dependency on the drug, which she hasn't been able to shake off.
I was taking the 10 milligram hydrocodone, about 25 to 30 of them a day.
Good job!
Generally, adults are prescribed a maximum of 6 painkillers daily, but Sarah has to take dozens of them. When she attempts to stop or reduce the dose, she becomes restless and depressed and reveals other symptoms of addiction.
All opioid prescribing increased in the United States, and as the prescribing went up, it led to an epidemic of opioid addiction and overdose deaths.
According to the US Centers for Disease Control and Prevention statistics, more than 2 million Americans like Sarah are suffering from drug addiction. In recent years, the situation has been aggravated by the popularity of the synthetic opioid fentanyl. Fentanyl was created in 1960 by Belgian chemist Dr. Paul Janssen. It was first introduced into clinical practice as an analgesic in 1963 and was subsequently included on the WHO's list of essential drugs. Its analgesic effect is about 100 times that of morphine. However, if it is abused, it can become addictive and even life-threatening. Just 2 milligrams of powdered fentanyl can be deadly. In 2017, a record 72,000 Americans were killed by overdosing on drugs. Most died as a result of taking fentanyl.
The opioid crisis is an emergency, and I'm saying officially right now, it is an emergency. It's a national emergency.
In recent years, we have brought you many news reports on the opioid crisis. But now, the opioid epidemic has hit home in a tragic and devastating way for me personally. My 21-year-old daughter, Emily, died of an overdose. Her official cause of death was fentanyl poisoning. The loss of a child, especially in this sudden and shocking way, has turned my world upside down. I never intended a member of my family to become part of the statistics you hear on the evening news.
Angela Kennecke is a news anchor with a South Dakota TV station. Her daughter, Emily Groth, died young as a result of overdosing on fentanyl. The autopsy report confirmed that the quantity of fentanyl in Emily's body was 6 times the maximum therapeutic dose for an adult male. In the face of a drugs crisis that was spiraling out of control, in May 2016, the US Food and Drug Administration approved the first unplantable detoxification drug, Probuphine. Compared with the traditional oral drugs methadone and Suboxone, the unplantable drug, which is about the size of a matchstick, releases buprenorphine into the arm, thereby alleviating the patient's dependence on heroin and opioids.
we're hoping that this is a new opportunity to treat opioid addiction.
This seemingly ordinary house is a drug rehabilitation center. It provides support for addicts who are fighting what may be their last battle with drug addiction.
We also have people from the educational variety come here.
18 years ago, the majority of the men that came to the program here were alcoholics with a little bit of drugs. In the last 5-6 years, we've seen a complete shift where probably it's reversed.
Green would flash up, and they took him.
Jeff Ringler first tried drugs at the age of 17. Since then, he has spent most of his life trying to escape his drug nightmare.
Once I'm in full-blown addiction, like, I don't care about you. I don't care about anybody around me. I'm going to do what I have to do, and I got prison time to prove it, and I got the scars on my body. I'm going to walk over you. I'm going to rob your grandmother. I'm going to, whatever it takes.
The drugs problem in the US has many causes and has built up over many years. All the measures to deal with it have failed to have the anticipated effect on slowing the pace of what has become an epidemic. And so, the US remains shrouded in a drugs haze.
The danger that we've got here, and the reason I say the 80s have called and they want their drug war back, is that this administration just really seems committed to fighting an opioid war on the supply side. That is, through interdiction, through law enforcement, through trying to raise the prices of these drugs on the street, which we know just doesn't work.
Drug abuse has taken a terrible toll on American society. From October 2020 to October 2021, more than 100,000 people in the US died from a drug overdose. The number of deaths from fentanyl abuse in the US is greater than that of gun and auto-related deaths combined. From January to June 2021, 1,150 teens aged 14 to 18 died from a drug overdose, a 20% rise from 2020, and more than double the figure in 2019. The average life expectancy of Americans in 2021 was 76.4 years, the lowest among comparable developed countries. People always think they are smart enough to control their drug use. But unless they exercise extreme caution, the drugs will take over their lives. How can a country anesthetized by poppies and marijuana ever escape the drugs abyss and realize the politicians' call to make America great again?
What's the address of the emergency?
My parents, my mom's on the floor, and my stepdad's basically pale and they're not waking up.
So both of your parents are not responsive? Is that what you're telling me?
Yes.
Okay. We will have a medic en route with you very shortly. Do you know if they're breathing?
Yeah, they're not breathing.
Okay, neither are breathing.
There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more,
to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.